I really want to check with you a video because it left me very surprised, and it's actually from one of the best investors in the world. This guy has earned millions of pounds and many people consider him a genius. And I want to analyze with you a little bit his point of view regarding the housing crisis. So let's see what we can learn from here.
I realised very quickly that the rich would accumulate a lot of money. And I knew, for like relatively obvious reasons, that that was going to push asset prices up because rich people, when given money, tend to spend almost all of it on assets. So I went and put a massive bet on the gold price going up.
Actually, this is very important, I would say, and very clever. Especially for this video, you need to remember that rich people put their money into assets. Okay, let's continue. This will make sense later.
It's not unique to housing, it's happening in basically every asset. What you have seen in the short term, the medium term and the long term now is just a massive increase in the price of basically all assets when compared to things like wages.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree, that's the whole point of having assets. You acquire them to maintain or increase your purchasing power through time. Your wage will never outpace assets because your wage is actually a liability for your employer or your company. And to be profitable, your company needs to have more assets than liabilities. So to put it simply, it's not that your employer doesn't want to pay you fairly. It's that it needs to give you less than what you give it to them in order for the company to be profitable. That's how the system works. Let's keep going.
The crisis of housing affordability is always thought about as a crisis of housing. And then the solutions and the causes and the reasons are always spoken about as if they are specific to the housing market. But if it's because of us not building enough houses, why is the gold price trebled? Why are the stock prices trebling? Why are land prices, quadrupling?
Okay, there are two things here. One is what we mentioned before, that assets increase in price over time. That's normal. That's the whole point of having assets, to stop losing purchasing power that you will lose if you just depend on your wages or your salary. But the second point that he does is, he mentions the crisis of housing is an asset crisis. Gary worked in Citibank, okay, as one of the most profitable traders ever. He's earned millions of pounds trading. Why would he ignore the fact that all assets are not equal? Indeed, one of the first things that you learn when you start learning investing is diversification. Investing in assets that aren't correlated. We all know that don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? He indeed mentioned before gold. The whole point of gold is that it's a cushion that protects against economic downturns. So he knows this, but he purposely mixes owning a house with owning assets. And I think he needs that link for his next statements to support themselves. I mean, I think we all know this, but you don't need to own a house to own assets. It is very convenient in this video that he equates owning a house to owning assets in general, because the barrier to entry to owning a house is a mortgage to 30 years and a huge initial payment. And the point of this video, I feel, is to make you like you've lost, like the system doesn't work. You cannot have you cannot have assets, and the rich is the cause. Let's keep moving.
The housing crisis is a crisis of asset affordability. All asset prices have gone up enormously, and that means you can't afford them. Now we're going to explain why.
Exactly. So as we said before, this statement only sustained itself because he mixed purposely the concept of having assets with having a house, when that's not true, as we already discussed.
But when you look at housing, housing is actually quite a special asset in the context of Western economies, especially here in the UK, especially in the US, for example, housing is the asset which is most likely to be owned by ordinary people. So most people don't have enormous stock market portfolios, but there seems to be a kind of conflict, right? Because even though we know rich people buy tons and tons of stocks, rich people don't appear to directly buy tons and tons of housing.
He previously emphasized how it's rich people, the one that own the houses, and it's what is driving the prices up. And you cannot afford houses because of that. But now he needs to address the fact that houses are actually owned in its majority by what he called the ordinary people. Indeed, I did my research, and I will attach it to the description, but only 17% of houses in the US are bought by investors, being the majority of the buyers owner-occupiers. And with big companies that own, these thousands of family rentals, they own only 4% of all the single-family rentals nationally. So pay attention, because how do you think he can defend the fact that the rich are the ones owning all the houses and driving the prices up, and at the same time the most common asset for ordinary people are houses, and they are the ones who own the majority? Let's take a look.
Mortgages are the way in which rich people buy and own your house. Probably the easiest way, I think, to visualize that is, say I'm a rich person, I've got £1 million cash spare. I can do two things with that. I can either go and buy the house, or I can lend it to my sister who buys the house. The end result on the price of houses is exactly the same. So rich people are pushing up the price of all assets, including housing. But when they push up the price of housing, it often comes through this channel of mortgage lending. And Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, you can only live in 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 houses, but you can own, especially via the channel of mortgage lending and owning credit, you can own 1,000 houses, you can own 10,000 houses.
Okay, I'm not sure if he's criticizing the act of lending money, but at the beginning the problem was rich people. And not because rich people don't own the majority of the houses that are bought in the US, it is actually ordinary people. But as you are also ordinary people, it is only the ordinary people that take out a mortgage from rich people. Okay, in any case, that's not how it works. Let me point out some basic things. One, you own the house, and it's the lender who owns a loan. And only if you default or are not able to pay the loan, they can foreclose. But that doesn't mean that the bank owns a house. The bank trusts you to buy the house with your own money. He just advances the money so he can earn an interest for it. If he doesn't believe that you can pay the house or the mortgage, he's not going to give you the money. Now, the second point that sounds very strange for me that he says is that it's not rich people lending you money to buy a house. You don't go to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk to ask for a mortgage. It's a regulated financial system pooling savings from millions of investors and depositors. It's true that wealthy households or individuals are the ones that own the most financial assets, but your mortgage is funded via banks. It's not Jeff Bezos. And as we saw before, the majority of the houses that are bought in the US is by owner-occupiers. Let's keep moving.
That dip in wealth inequality means assets being owned by ordinary people. Now we've moved towards a much more unequal society. The rich are much richer, ordinary people are much poorer.
Okay, remember that he's not talking here about rich and poor. He's talking about people that own assets and people that don't. If you own assets, you are richer and richer with time. And if you don't, you just barely see your wages keeping up with inflation.
What that means is you are increasingly competing with billionaires and multimillionaires with enormous amounts of passive income for ownership of the houses, and you can't compete with them.
This is what we said before, you know, the link that he did between owning house and owning assets. You don't need to compete on a 500,000 US dollars to buy a house with anyone to own assets. Houses are assets, but assets are much more than just houses.
The reason you're losing your housing is the same reason you're losing your healthcare, the same reason you're losing your education. It's the same reason that you're unable to get good jobs. It's because you are being squeezed out by the rapid, unbelievably rapid growth in wealth and luxury and living standards of the rich. You don't fight that fight, you lose your wealth, you lose your resources, you lose your living standards, you lose your housing. So, in answer to our opening question, why is housing expensive? It's because the rich are buying it all, and you can't compete with them. The way to deal with that is to tax the rich more, to tax working people less.
Listen, it feels good when someone tells you that you're a victim and that you don't deserve it and that you're being taken advantage of, It takes out the uncomfortable responsibility out of your shoulders. It's just that it's simply not true. It makes me a little bit sad to see that at the end, the solution to all our problems is to tax the rich. A person that is an expert on investing and economics perfectly knows that he's telling half-truths and making assumptions that are not true just to sustain his arguments. He really likes to speak about the rich people and ordinary people and to create this us versus them mentality. It gives a populistic vibe, okay? And it absolutely crashed down when he realized that it's ordinary people buying houses, because he cannot criticize you or what he called the ordinary people. He really needs to do gymnastics to support his rich against the poor narrative, and he's desperate to protect it. Additionally, through this video, he clearly knows that the only way in which you cannot benefit from this situation is if you don't have any assets. So it's very interesting for me that he actually explains you how to thrive in the system, but instead of arriving to the conclusion that you need to own assets to keep your wealth, he wants you to arrive at the conclusion that you cannot win at all and the system doesn't work. It's rigged against you. That tells me that he actually doesn't want you to win in the system. He wants you to feel frustrated with it, and probably for reasons that benefit him more than benefit you. The lessons that I want you to learn from this: you need to own assets to survive financially in the long term, and you need to own them to prevent populists from manipulating you into a huge revolution that pretends to repair the system and that probably benefits someone else that's not you, because you own assets and your wealth is protected.